John glanced at the menu, his eyes scanning the odd assortment of dishes. He was used to adventurous dining experiences, but the items here were on another level. Nebulan noodles with cosmic sauce. Martian morsels? Then his eyes caught the words rare steak, and relief washed over him. Steak. A safe, delicious, human staple, probably. When the waiter, a gangly alien with 4 arms and an unnervingly toothy smile, arrived to take his order, John confidently pointed. "I'll take the rare steak, please." The waiter scribbled something down on a floating pad, gave a knowing smirk, and disappeared. John sipped his drink, trying to ignore the odd stares from nearby patrons. The restaurant was packed with a mix of humans and aliens, and everyone seemed to be having a good time, except him. The couple at the next table was feeding each other glowing orbs that emitted soft cooing sounds. Across the room, a reptilian creature appeared to be enjoying a wriggling dish that looked alarmingly alive. Never again, John muttered to himself, vowing to stick to Earth cuisine after this. Minutes later, the waiter returned, pushing a covered platter with an air of ceremony. John straightened in his seat, suddenly excited. Maybe this would turn out fine after all. The waiter set the platter down with a flourish, tapping the cloche dramatically. "Your rare steak," the waiter announced, lifting the lid. John's face froze mid-smile. Sitting on the plate wasn't a steak. It wasn't even food. It was a girl, a very naked, very blue-skinned alien girl, her skin shimmering faintly like a twilight sky. She was reclining on a bed of greens, decorated with what looked like edible flowers, her large golden eyes blinking up at him. "Hi," she said, her voice smooth and musical. "I'm Zyra. I'm your steak." John choked on his drink, sputtering. What? This has to be a mistake." Zyra tilted her head, her long, silvery hair cascading over her shoulders. "No mistake. You ordered me. I ordered steak. Steak. You know, beef? Meat? Not." He gestured wildly at her, struggling to form coherent words. "A naked person," the waiter interjected, his toothy grin widening. But in our culture, rare steak refers to a sacred offering of companionship. Zyra has been chosen to bond with you. Congratulations." "Congratulations?" John squeaked. "This isn't a wedding, it's dinner." Zyra giggled, a sound that sent a strange mix of panic and warmth through him. "You humans have such funny courting rituals. But don't worry, I'll adapt. I'm very eager to learn all about pleasing you." John's brain short-circuited. "Pleasing me? No. I think there's been a huge misunderstanding here." The waiter clapped 2 of his hands together, clearly ignoring him. "This is a great honor, sir. Rejecting her would be seen as an act of grave disrespect to our species." "Disrespect?" John's voice climbed an octave. Zyra reached out and touched his hand, her touch cool and surprisingly gentle. "Don't be nervous," she said softly. "I know humans are shy about intimacy, but I'm very patient." "I'm not shy," John snapped, pulling his hand back as heat rushed to his face. "I just didn't sign up for this." The waiter's smile faltered, his voice dropping ominously. "Refusing the bond could lead to complications. Perhaps even a dishonor fee." "What's a dishonor fee?" John asked warily. Zyra leaned in, her golden eyes sparkling mischievously. "Oh, it's bad. You don't want that. Just accept me, it's easier." John stared at her, utterly dumbfounded. How had his evening spiraled into this madness? 1 minute he was craving a steak, and now he was being guilted into marrying his dinner? "I'm calling this in," he muttered, reaching for his phone. The waiter blocked his hand with surprising speed. "I must insist, sir, that you fulfill your obligation." John glanced around for support, but the other diners were too busy enjoying their meals, or their sentient dishes, to notice. Even the glowing orb couple gave him a thumbs up. Zyra sighed dramatically, sliding off the plate with unexpected grace. "Fine," she said, brushing crumbs off her smooth, shimmering skin. "If you're going to be difficult, we'll have to work on building trust first." I'll stay with you until you're ready to consummate the bond. Consummate? John sputtered, nearly falling out of his chair. Lady, I don't even know your last name. She smiled sweetly. I don't have one. But you can give me yours. That's how it works, right? No. That's not how it works. The waiter clapped again, all 4 hands this time, and gave a satisfied nod. Wonderful! I'll add the to-go bond package to your bill. Enjoy your evening, Mr. and Mrs. Human. Before John could protest further, the waiter scuttled off, leaving him alone with Zaira. She stepped closer, her golden eyes softening. Don't worry, she murmured, resting a hand on his arm. I'm very low maintenance. I only need food, shelter, and occasional cuddling. John groaned, burying his face in his hands. I just wanted a steak. John's pulse raced as he stared at Zaira, still perched delicately on the platter, her golden eyes sparkling with curiosity. He couldn't decide whether to cover her with a napkin or bolt for the door. Okay, he said, forcing himself to breathe. Let's clarify something. I ordered food. You're not food. This is a mistake. Zaira leaned forward, clearly misunderstanding his tone. You accepted me. That makes me yours now. It's a great honor to have been chosen. I didn't choose you, John exclaimed, his voice cracking. I chose steak. SDK, cow? Grilled. Medium rare, maybe. She tilted her head, her silvery hair brushing against her bare shoulders. In my culture, being served as a rare steak signifies eternal partnership. You've claimed me. Rejecting me now would bring shame upon my family and dishonor my entire species. John blinked. Shame? Dishonor? Lady, I don't even know how to pronounce your species' name, let alone participate in whatever this is. The waiter, who had been lingering nearby with an almost gleeful expression, chimed in. Sir, if you reject her, you'll not only insult her but also incur a substantial dishonor fee. And I must warn you, it's very steep. Fee? John snapped. You're charging me to not eat someone? Not someone. Zaira corrected, smiling sweetly. Your chosen mate. John buried his face in his hands. This couldn't be happening. When he finally looked up, Zaira had slipped off the platter and was now standing beside him, completely unconcerned with her lack of clothing. Patrons from nearby tables glanced over, their expressions ranging from amused to approving. I can see you're nervous, she said, her voice soothing. Humans can be so shy about these things. Don't worry. We'll figure this out together. Nervous? I'm not nervous, John hissed, trying to keep his voice low. I'm mortified. And confused. And could you please put on some clothes? She frowned. But why? Aren't I to your liking? I was specially selected for my attributes. She gestured down at herself, clearly baffled by his reaction. John pinched the bridge of his nose, his frustration mounting. You're not listening. I didn't sign up for this. I just wanted a quiet dinner, not a wife. Zaira's expression softened, her voice dropping to a sultry whisper. You don't have to pretend, John. I know human men sometimes like to play hard to get. It's part of the courtship ritual, isn't it? It's really not. The waiter coughed delicately. Sir, I must remind you that cultural misunderstandings can lead to very messy situations. I recommend resolving this amicably. Messy situations? John repeated, incredulous. Amicably? Fine, here's my resolution. I'll leave, and you can take her back to wherever she came from. Deal? Zaira gasped, her golden eyes filling with tears. You would leave me? Just cast me aside like an unwanted crumb? Do I mean nothing to you? Oh, come on! John groaned. We literally just met. She sniffled dramatically, looking heartbreakingly fragile despite her earlier confidence. You humans, you're so cruel. John felt every eye in the restaurant turn toward him. The whispers began almost immediately. Poor girl. What a heartless man. Typical human arrogance. John groaned. Fine. You can come with me. But only because I don't want to get banned from this restaurant. Zaira beamed. I knew you'd see reason. This is going to be wonderful. He wasn't so sure. John stormed out of the restaurant, muttering under his breath, but Zaira was hot on his heels, gliding gracefully through the street as though she'd rehearsed the scene. Wait! She called, her tone halfway between pleading and teasing. You can't just walk away. We're bonded now. He spun around, hands on his hips. Bonded? Lady, the only bond here is the sheer insanity of this situation. Do you even understand what you've done? Zaira stopped short, tilting her head in that infuriatingly curious way. I've offered you my eternal loyalty, my companionship, my body, she said, letting the word linger. In my culture, that's the ultimate gesture of love and trust. Well, in my culture, John shot back. You can't just spring a lifetime commitment on someone over dinner. That's not trust, it's entrapment. She looked genuinely puzzled. But you accepted the platter. You looked me in the eyes. That seals the bond. Look, where I'm from, a guy looking at a girl doesn't automatically mean they're married. If it did, I'd have a lot more explaining to do. Zaira stepped closer, her shimmering skin catching the light. Your words say one thing, but your energy says another. You're flustered, your heart is racing. You're drawn to me. John took a step back, holding up his hands like a man cornered by a very determined salesperson. I'm drawn to getting out of this alive, not to you. Big difference. She raised an eyebrow. You're protesting too much, human. My people have a keen sense for emotions, and yours are conflicted. It's adorable. John groaned, running a hand through his hair. You don't get it. I don't want to hurt your feelings, okay? You're gorgeous, but this whole thing is insane. You can't just force a guy into marriage because of some mix-up with a menu item. Zaira's lips curled into a mischievous smile. Oh, I see. You're afraid of how much you might enjoy this. I understand. New experiences can be overwhelming. Overwhelming? John snapped. You're overwhelming. I'm standing here arguing with a naked alien bride about whether or not I accidentally married her. Do you hear yourself? She sighed dramatically, crossing her arms. You humans are so complicated. One minute you're claiming me with passion, the next you're acting like I'm a burden. Make up your mind. Passion? What passion? I ordered a steak. Yes, and you got me, she said, stepping even closer. I'm the better choice, don't you think? John couldn't help but glance at her, which only made things worse. Look, he said, his voice softer now. I'm not saying you're not amazing. You're just not what I signed up for. Zaira placed a hand on his chest, her touch sending a jolt through him. Maybe you didn't sign up for it, but you don't have to fight it either. Let me prove to you that this could work. John stared at her, a mix of exasperation and something he didn't want to name creeping into his expression. Prove it how? She grinned, her golden eyes twinkling. You'll see. Give me one night, and I promise you won't regret it. John's head fell back with a groan. This is going to be a disaster, isn't it? It'll be memorable, Zaira said, linking her arm through his. And isn't that what you really wanted when you walked into that restaurant? Something rare? John sighed. Rare, yes. Insane, no. Well, she said, smirking, you can't have one without the other. John paced back and forth in his small apartment, his hands flying up in exasperation as Zaira sat calmly on the couch, watching him with an amused expression. She had borrowed one of his shirts, which hung loosely on her lithe frame, but it didn't seem to bother her. You can't just decide to stay here, he said, his voice echoing off the walls. This isn't a hotel, and I'm not running an intergalactic bed and breakfast. She rested her chin in her hands, her golden eyes following his movements. You're so dramatic. Isn't that part of your charm? Charm? This isn't charm, it's stress. He stopped pacing to point at her. You've turned my life upside down in less than 3 hours. That's not normal. Zaira shrugged. Your life didn't seem that exciting before I came along. Maybe this is exactly what you needed. Needed? John barked out a laugh. What I needed was a nice, quiet dinner, not a cosmic wife and a side of emotional chaos. She stretched out on the couch, her movements fluid and graceful, and John quickly looked away. You're so uptight, she said, smirking. No wonder you're single. Do you ever let yourself enjoy anything? Of course I do, John shot back defensively. I just prefer to enjoy things that don't involve existential crises. Zaira grinned. An existential crisis isn't such a bad thing. It means you're alive, feeling, growing. And I like watching you squirm. It's cute, he groaned, throwing his hands in the air. This isn't cute. This is a nightmare. What am I supposed to do, huh? Call up immigration and say, hey, I accidentally married an alien, can you help me annul it? Annul it? She said, sitting up sharply. Her playful demeanor shifted, and her eyes narrowed. You'd dishonor me that easily? Oh, don't start with that again, he muttered, pinching the bridge of his nose. I don't want to dishonor you, okay? He paused, his shoulders slumping. I just don't know how to handle this. Any of this. Her expression softened, and she stood, moving closer to him. You don't have to handle it alone, she said quietly. That's the point of bonding. We share the burden. We figure it out together. He looked at her, startled by the sincerity in her tone. But we don't even know each other, he said, his voice gentler now. How can we figure it out when we're practically strangers? Zaira tilted her head, studying him. We may not know all the details yet, but I know the important things. I know you're kind, even when you're frustrated. I know you care more than you let on. And I know you're not as alone as you think. Her words hit him harder than he expected, and for a moment, he didn't know how to respond. He rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. That's a lot of assumptions to make about a guy you just met. I'm good at reading people, she said with a small smile. It's part of who I am. Well, maybe you misread me this time, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. She stepped even closer, her gaze locking onto his. Maybe. Or maybe you're just scared of what happens if I didn't. John swallowed hard, unsure whether he was more afraid of her being wrong or being right. John stood in the middle of his living room, his thoughts swirling as Zaira hovered nearby, her presence somehow both calming and unsettling. He rubbed his forehead, feeling the weight of everything crashing down on him. What was he supposed to do now? All right, he said, finally breaking the silence. Let's just lay this out. You and I are not married. You got served as a rare steak and misunderstood what that meant. This isn't some intergalactic bonding ceremony, and you need to go back home. Zaira's eyes flashed, a mix of hurt and confusion creeping into her expression. But I didn't misunderstand, John. I know what it means. And I know you've been avoiding me. It's okay to admit it. You're afraid of the bond we have. John's jaw tightened. You're not my wife. I don't even know your last name. How can you say we have a bond when we don't even understand each other's worlds? I understand you, she said, moving closer. I've studied humans. I know what you want, what you need, even if you don't realize it yourself. Studied humans? John let out a sarcastic laugh. Oh, great, now I'm being analyzed. Fantastic. She tilted her head, unfazed by his sarcasm. You're more complex than you think. That's why I'm not leaving. I can help you understand yourself better. Help me understand myself? What is this, a therapy session? He threw up his hands in frustration. This isn't about me. This is about you, thinking that we're something we're not. Why can't we be something? Zaira asked, her voice surprisingly soft. Why can't we explore what this connection might be? What's so wrong with giving it a chance? John stared at her, trying to find the words, but all he could do was shake his head. Because it's too fast. It's insane. I don't know if I can handle this. I'm not ready for this, whatever this is. Zaira stood in front of him now, her expression serious. You think you're not ready? You think I'm just some spontaneous fling you can get rid of when you're tired of me? No, that's not it at all, John said, his voice rising. It's not about you. It's about me not understanding how we got here. How did we go from a simple meal to this? He motioned vaguely between them. Zaira's lips curved into a small, knowing smile. It's because you were curious. You wanted something new, something exciting. I just happened to be the catalyst for that excitement. You wanted rare steak, John. And here I am, offering you something even rarer than you could have imagined. John opened his mouth to argue but then stopped himself. She had a point, whether he wanted to admit it or not. The night had been chaotic, but somehow, he couldn't deny that a part of him had been intrigued from the moment he laid eyes on her. Fine, he said, his tone softer now. Maybe you're right. Maybe I did want something different. But I don't know if I'm ready to handle all this. I've never been good at commitment. Hell, I can't even keep a houseplant alive. Zaira laughed, her eyes sparkling. I'm not asking for your entire life, John. Just one step at a time. You don't need to figure everything out all at once. I guess. He sighed, sitting down heavily on the couch. I'm just scared. What if this goes wrong? What if we end up hating each other? You don't have to be scared, she said gently, sitting beside him. I'm not asking you to marry me tomorrow. I'm just asking you to let me in. We can figure this out together. No pressure. John looked at her, seeing the sincerity in her eyes. It was impossible to ignore the genuine warmth in her words, the way she wasn't forcing him into anything. Maybe there was something here, something worth exploring. All right, he said quietly, after a long pause. We'll take it one step at a time. But no more surprise marriages, okay? Zaira grinned, her eyes twinkling. Deal. But you have to admit, I'm the most interesting thing that's happened to you in a long time. John couldn't help but smile, despite himself. You're definitely something, I'll give you that. She leaned in, her lips brushing against his cheek in a soft, teasing kiss. I knew you'd come around. John chuckled, shaking his head. Yeah, well, I didn't come around willingly. But I guess I'll give this bonding thing a shot. Zaira's grin grew wider. Good. Because you're stuck with me now. Great, he muttered, half amused, half exasperated. Stuck with the alien who thinks I'm her husband. You'll get used to it, she teased, nudging him with her elbow. And who knows? Maybe you'll end up liking it. John leaned back, sighing. Yeah, we'll see about that. A week had passed since John's strange marriage announcement, and things between him and Zaira had settled into a peculiar rhythm. Every day was an adventure in itself, from Zaira's quirky attempts to blend in with human life to John's reluctant acceptance of the strange bond they had. But today, something was different. John was starting to wonder if he could actually get used to this. Zaira was perched on the counter, casually flipping through one of John's old comic books while he prepared breakfast. Her legs dangled lazily, her alien skin glowing faintly in the early morning light. So, what's on the agenda today, husband? She asked with a mischievous glint in her eye. John froze for a moment, the spatula in his hand midair. He turned to her with a raised eyebrow. I've asked you 100 times, Zaira. I'm not your husband. Not yet anyway. But you're getting closer, she teased, hopping down from the counter and walking over to him. You do realize we've been living together for a week, right? Yeah, but that doesn't mean anything, John muttered, his voice tinged with frustration. I'm still processing this. I'm still figuring out what all this means. Zaira gave him a knowing smile, clearly entertained by his struggle. But you're not fighting it as much anymore. You're relaxing into it. Relaxing? He scoffed, running a hand through his hair. This whole thing is still insane, Zaira. A rare steak? You ordered the rare steak, she replied with a laugh. And you're still here. That's progress. John shot her a look, his patience thinning. All right, so now what? What happens next? You want me to take you out to meet my friends? You think they're going to accept my alien wife? Zaira's eyes softened, her expression shifting to something more serious. I don't need to meet your friends, John. I don't need anyone to approve. I just need you. He sighed, feeling the weight of her words. The thing was, she was right. He had gotten used to her presence. He had gotten used to the strange, inexplicable feeling of waking up next to her, of hearing her voice throughout the day, of her endless affection that he couldn't quite shake off. I didn't expect to feel this way, he admitted quietly, looking down at his hands. I didn't expect you to get under my skin this much. Zaira stepped closer, placing a hand gently on his arm. It's not about expecting it. It's about being open to it. And I see you opening up, little by little. John looked into her eyes, suddenly struck by how much trust was there, how much sincerity. It was terrifying how easily she was weaving herself into his life. But maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. Maybe he was scared of it because it was real. So, what are we doing today? He asked, breaking the moment. You know, aside from further complicating my life. Well, she began, walking over to the window. I've been thinking. Maybe it's time I showed you my world. He blinked. Your world? As in, like outer space? Yes, she said, her voice becoming more serious. I've been holding back. I wanted to make sure you were ready, but you've proven that you can handle this bond. You can handle me. John was silent for a moment, his thoughts racing. You want me to go to space? With you? She nodded, her eyes shining with excitement. Yes. My planet. My people. You'll see where I come from. You'll understand everything. John chuckled nervously. Space travel? That's one hell of a leap from breakfast. Zaira smiled, the warmth in her gaze never wavering. I didn't think you'd be so scared of it. I thought you were adventurous. Adventurous? John repeated incredulously. Adventurous is trying sushi for the first time, not hopping on a spaceship and flying across the universe. She laughed softly, stepping forward and wrapping her arms around him. You've got it all wrong, John. This isn't about adventure. This is about us together. Don't you want to see where we could go from here? John's heart beat a little faster as he found himself caught in her embrace, the softness of her alien skin against his own. He wasn't sure what it was, but something about her made everything else seem insignificant. All right, he said, finally surrendering to the moment. Let's do it. Let's go to your planet. But just remember, if this turns out to be some kind of intergalactic hostage situation, I'm blaming you. Zaira grinned widely, her eyes glimmering with excitement. You won't regret this. I promise. As they shared a quiet moment together, John couldn't help but feel that maybe, just maybe, this unexpected bond between them wasn't as crazy as he'd originally thought. Maybe it was exactly what he needed all along. And for the first time in days he let himself believe that it might actually work.